Labor Day or Workers' Day is an annual celebration talking about celebrating the right of workers. But it is unfortunate here in Nigeria that Workers' Day have been marked in the face of rising inflation as well as scarcity of fuel that have affected businesses as well as civil servants and every other person living in the country presently. Good morning and welcome to the Dailies on Echo Television, where we keep you updated with all that is happening on the papers this morning. I am Sarah Lashadasham and I'll do the program alongside Rachel Tansy. Good morning, Rachel.
Sarah.
How you doing?
I'm fine. How about you?
I'm great. Happy Workers' Day.
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, with all that is happening presently, even though I know that yesterday the president made a kind of a way of increasing 25%, 35% consolidated wages for other people that were not being captured earlier on. But then looking at all that is happening right now, and I remember when Labour were saying the fact that the president should please award the workers by increasing their salary and talking about the real minimum wage that should be starting from today and all of that. But I mean, it's a joy for us to be alive to witness another Workers' Day. But we're looking forward to seeing that it's not just about celebrating the rights of workers, but then as well as let us see what can we do to make sure that, this Workers' Day is another special day. Even though I know this year's theme was more like focusing on ensuring safety and the health of workers in a changing climate. So of course, if you don't have money, Rachel, how will you want to maintain good health? I remember you mentioned issue of health yesterday when we're looking at poverty affecting Nigerians, and we said a number of people cannot even afford to have access to health facility because they do not even have the money. Regular checkups that they are supposed to go, they cannot go. And then we're seeing, let's even talk about pensioners. Because even though they are pensioners, they are still part of workers. At one point or once upon a time, they were workers. Yeah. So let's see what the government will do, and not just increasing their wages, but then let's also look at our inflation rate. What can we do about it? Because, Rachel, with the way things are, more people are losing their jobs. No matter how much you're earning, the equivalent is being decreased, is decreasing daily, because you might be earning 100,000, but believe you me, people who were earning 100,000 5 years ago, what you can do with it then is not what you can do with it right now because of the way inflation is eating. So I know it's a special day for workers. We have so many unions celebrating, eating barbecues, having soft drinks and all of that. But beyond today, even though it's a public holiday all over, but beyond today, let us see that, our workers are being treated like human beings. Let's see that, when you put in certain hours of work, you should be rewarded for it. I mean, we know the way the workers, they work is 8 hours of work, 8 hours of rest, 8 hours of recreation and all of that. But let us make sure that, the government should do right by its workers. You cannot tell workers to go to the office 8 to 5, depending on how you work, and at the end of the day, you don't get being paid, even though you cannot be rewarded totally. But that means, to some extent, let you feel that, I'm putting in these hours of work and the government is appreciating me by also paying me well for me. So our fingers are crossed, but we want to use the platform to wish all our workers out there a happy Workers' Day.
Anytime I see such a day like this being celebrated, on the other hand, when we have the government workers say, there is this and that, there are certain benefits coming towards us, I don't see that in the private sector. So honestly, Sele, when we talk Workers' Day, I'm looking forward to inclusiveness in everything that we do. And there's that gap in Nigeria from what the government workers get and what the private sector workers get. And then until we have a system where it's inclusive, I think it will just, because there's so much exploitation in the private sector, there's so much exploitation. And I think that the government of the day needs to wake up and include certain things, it doesn't just stop. Of course, if the president says 25% to 35% increase or anything for a period of time, of course, he is talking about people under his payroll, that is those working for the government. But what are the other things that the government can put in place that you make sure that people under the private sectors are also being carried away? And for years, that has been the gap, because there's so much exploitation. Even if you find yourself in a private organization that you're well paid, your life is hijacked completely. And then the one that your life is not hijacked completely, you're underpaid, or you are overworked, and then you don't even see, there's no dividends, there's no, you can't say that, you know what I am doing, you've been rewarded properly. So what is the government doing? Because we can't be talking about minimum wage, for example, and then the private sectors are left to just pay what they feel like paying, and you work more hours. Because we have places that when it comes to government work, is few that depending on the office you're put in, that you can go 8 to 4 or more and work on the weekend, and there's usually compensations for that. But what about those in the private sectors that it's normal to work overtime? You work on the weekend, and there are no laws guiding to say, okay, this for sure has to come to your place. And this is where I say, when we are saying there's growth, it shows, no matter how small it is. Growth cannot be selective. If it's selective, it cannot grow. When you go to water a plant and you choose, you have a farm, for example, and you decide to farm, to water one side more than the other, in the end, the backwardness of the growth of this side will affect the other, because in total, your harvest will not be the quantity that is expected. It's the same thing. If there's any sector that is not being watered properly, we are still backward economically. We are still backward when it comes to the standard of living. We are still backward in poverty. We will continue to remain in poverty until there's balance. So what am I looking forward to see, other than just 25%, 30%, other than just these areas, this wage award and all of that? I am looking forward to the government on Workers' Day taking decisions that is inclusive of both those under the government and those under the private sector, because what worries me is exploitation going on in the private sector, and then it needs to stop. And the government is above every other. Despite having a mixed economy, we still have a government that is above every other, including the private sector. So when they bring out certain law, you must abide to it, regardless of your position or how big your company or whatever is your own structure. So this is what I'm looking forward to, that when we talk about minimum wage, it's for everybody, not just government workers, because we are working the same hours, even working more than some government workers, and yet they get these areas, they get these bonuses, they get all of these freebies and all of that, and we have private sectors just exploiting, and nothing is being done about it.
You know, that's why we've seen where private sectors are coming up, say they also need to have their own union that will speak on their behalf, because they are being exploited eventually. You give them more, but you do not get the reward equivalent to that. So our fingers are crossed. But nevertheless, it's a special day for workers, and I hope that they and we also will enjoy the day. Well, let's take a look at the first paper we would love to look at is the Voice of Liberty. And on Workers' Day, federal government declares today public holiday. More detail of that can be found in the paper. This was coming from the Minister of Interior, Tunde Ojo. You can find detail of that in the paper. ICPC traces 219.8 billion naira allocation across 176 MDAs over 5 years. Kaduna refinery to resume 90% production capacity by December, coming from the MD, and Nigerians are hoping for what will come out from the Port Harcourt refinery as well, which was supposed to start operating, but there have been this quietness in that regard. Federal government approves 25% to 35% salary increase for civil servants. The federal government has approved an increase of between 25% and 35% in salary increase for civil servants on the remaining 6 consolidated salary structures, and the remaining 6, we're talking about tertiary institutions, we're talking about public service salary structure, we're also talking about paramilitary salary structure, we're also talking about intelligence, community salary structure, police salary structure, and I'm happy with all of the structures that we are having increase there. This will make our civil, not only the civil servants to work well, but also see the paramilitary, the police, even our health workers doing all they can do to make sure that all the sectors are working well. StarTimes secure non-exclusive broadcasting right for for the La Liga sports. You can find more detail of that in the paper. 200 billion naira debt. Petrol marketers threaten withdrawal of service amid fuel scarcity. We hope that something will be done about that before they withdraw their services. Court to hear 3 applications on Ganduji suspension May 27. And on fuel scarcity, House of Reps and order suspension of electricity tariff hike. Summon the Petroleum Minister. More details can be found in the paper, and that's all on Voice of Liberty.
On Nigerian Tribune, the big story: federal government approves 25%, 35% salary increase for civil servant. New structure to affect workers on remaining 6 consolidated salary structure. Details can be found on page 3. Reps to NERC halt hike in electricity tariff. The writer saying NBA threatens to sue. Discuss with tariff increases, Nigerians subsidizing federal government inefficiencies. Coming from Atiku. You can find details on page 3, 4, and 8. Senators quarrel, point fingers over seed allocation. I signed executive order 10 to unlock 10 billion naira fresh oil gas sector investment. Statement from President Bola Tinubu. You can find details on page 30. Social media non-priority for national security. MFA faces fresh charges to be around May 15. Ogun government alerts resident of looming flood disaster. You can find details on page 26. On petrol scarcity, marketers to flood market with 300 million liters. IBMA agonizes over 200 billion naira debt. Kaduna refinery to begin 60% production by December. A report from NNPCL. Details can be found on page 3, 6, and 7. We have a picture story showing a gas explosion at Ajegunle Olodi Apapa in Lagos, which injured 10 people and affected 3 shops. This happened on Tuesday, and that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On the Nation newspaper, we have Nigerians VAT collection lowest in Africa, says Abbas. President unlocks $10 billion oil and gas investment. Data found on page 3. Expertise action on East-West Road. South-South governors urge the federal government. Tinubu to lead 25 years of democracy walk on May 29. More data found on page 3. North governors renew battle to end out-of-school children manners, where we have a caption here that says Northern Nigeria currently bears the burden of the highest number of out-of-school children in the world. Every child deserves access to quality education and the opportunity to develop the skills necessary to succeed. More detail in the paper. Drama over sitting arrangement in Senate, and then we have Lagos spent 849 million naira on bursary. Detailed on page 5. We have public servant, military, police get 35% consolidated pay raise. Workers get federal government Mayday gift, and then labor to demand quick action on minimum wage. Reps invite minister over lingering petrol scarcity, where we have NNPCL, and then Miman become soon. And then also we have pay 200 billion naira claim, says Itman. More detail found in the paper. EFCC to arraign MFLM May 15 on 3-count amended charge. Detail found on page 4. And we have a picture story showing us the queues that are actually there, where people are struggling to get the fuel. And that's all on the Nation newspaper.
On the Punch newspaper, Workers' Day, Labour laments rising food prices and fuel crisis. Reps, NLC, NBA students reject electricity tariff hike, lament rising inflation. Queues worsen, gridlock, commuters stranded, more vessels discharged, PMS. You can find details on page 2 and 6. Interpol pursues extradition of Binance chief from Kenya. You can find details on page 20. Naira rebounds as dollar supply hits $7 billion in 2 months. Federal government raises salaries of military, police, and others. Dangote refinery gets valid operating license soon, coming from the federal government. Still on the Punch, 200 billion naira debt. Ipman threatens closure of 30,000 filling stations. 155 stranded Nigerians repatriated from Libya. Federal government offers free ride as Port Harcourt-Aba train service resumes. Details can be found on page 32. We have a picture story of the fire that took place that gutted the market in Lagos yesterday, and we have a report here showing that a pregnant woman together with 8 others were injured in the gas explosion. You can find details on page 5, and that's all the news on the Punch newspaper.
On First News newspaper, the big story boosting morale. Federal government approves salary increase for civil servants, delivering early Workers' Day cheer. Detail found in the paper. Peter Obi urges Tinubu to halt Lagos-Calabar highway project to prevent job losses. Nigerian workers going through unprecedented hardship. Atiku in May Day message. Ex-Governor Bafarawa recount ordeal as bandit forced him from 10,000 hectares Kaduna farm. Obaseke 70,000 naira minimum wage, latest attempt to deceive our people, said Osage. You can find detail in the paper. And on electricity tariff hike, you have failed Nigerians, Falana tells power minister. We are still working on extraditing Binance fugitives, says the Interpol VP. Still on First News newspaper, reps direct the NERC to halt implementation of new electricity tariff. Summon Petroleum Minister over lingering fuel scarcity. Northern Governors Forum confront crisis. Region tops global ranking for out-of-school children. And we have petrol marketers threatening fuel supply disruption amid 200 billion naira debt crisis. We have a picture story where we can see the senators engaging in frenzy debate as the seating arrangements spark controversy in renovating the Senate chamber Abuja during their plenary yesterday. And that's all on the First News newspaper.
On Vanguard, May Day, federal government approves pay rise for workers as labor leaders lament hardship. The writer saying asks workers to prepare for struggle ahead. Nigerian workers have never had it so bad, a statement from Atiku. Says citizens subsidizing corruption, inefficiencies of federal government. Kalu applauds workers' commitment to national development. Glo loads Nigerian workers on sacrifices. Federal government declared today public holiday. Federal government putting in place measures to mitigate pains of policies coming from APC. You can find details on page 5. Nigeria's VAT collection lowest in Africa, coming from Speaker Abbas. Sanwo-Olu restates commitment to improve life of Lagos residents. Fuel scarcity, 8 vessels discharge over 300 million litre at Apapa and other ports. Details can be found on page 19. A column on page 22 by Afe Babalola and NFF wanted foreign coach not Finidi. A statement from Ipeba. You can find details on page 37. And then we have a picture story where we can see the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Cardoso, in an introductory visit. And that's all the news on Vanguard newspaper.
On Daily Times newspaper, electricity East-West Road top agenda as South-South governors meet in Yenugua. Detail found in the paper. Petrol scarcity to worsen as Ipman threatens strike over 200 billion naira debt. Federal government approves salary increase for civil servants. Senate in rowdy section over seating arrangement resumes in renovated chamber. And on Workers' Day, plight of Nigerian workers there as wage increment remains a mirage, coming from Atiku. CBN Deputy Governor raises concern over surge in non-performing loans. You can find more detail of that on page 14. We have some few picture stories, which we have some MSM stakeholders engagement enterprises today, where we can see Wale do the Minister of Finance there with other people that will be present during the conference that we'll be holding. And we also have a picture story up here We can see some of our security agency, the troops of 6th Brigadier Sector 3 operation invading a terrorist camp in Taraba State, and we wish them all the best as they put their life out there to secure the country. And that's all on Daily Times newspaper.
On Nigerian News Direct, 2024 UTME results, Ogun ahead of other states. Court fixes May 27 to hear case on Ganduje's suspension. Reps halt implementation of new electricity tariff. Gas explosion leaves 10 injured, got shops, tricycles in Lagos. The big story, Merman confirms availability of 300 million liters of petrol, strives to end delivery glitch. As Reps summon Petroleum Minister, other stakeholders over rising petrol prices. Queues will disappear by Wednesday, an assurance from NNPC. Today's Wednesday, and we'll wait to see by the end of the day. You can find details on page 3. Nance to embark on nationwide protest on May 7 over fuel scarcity and electricity crisis. Lagos Calabar Highway a misplaced priority. Fix 50 abandoned highways or be urges federal government. Details can be found on page 3, and that's all the news on Nigerian News Direct.
All right, let's take a look at New Telegraph newspaper. PMS crisis, monthly importation drops by 54% to 74.5 million liters. And on Naira, analysts want fiscal authorities to complement CBN's policies. Drama as legislatures clash over seating arrangement. And on insecurity, reps seek dedicated funds for school safety. And on Workers' Day, federal government declares today public holiday. Also coming from Borno State, why Borno didn't sack 10,566 unqualified teachers. You want to know why? You can read more detail of that on page 3. Still on the issue of the May Day, federal government increases salaries and pension for civil servants by 25% and 30%. Backdates payment to January 2024. ASU demand better welfare for Nigerian workers. Asks the federal government to halt brain drain universities. Kalu commend workers' commitment to national development, and Nigerians subsidizing corruption inefficiency in government, coming from Atiku. Northern governors are saying we will invest in critical infrastructure for economic development. Nigeria now recruitment-based transit route destination for traffickers, coming from an NGO. You can find detail of that on page 30. Niger now recruitment-based transit route and destination for traffickers. And on the coastal highway, demolition of structures can affect $200 million investment and 1 million jobs, coming from Peter Obi. Nigerians refugee in Chad and Cameroon to be repatriated. You can find detail of that on page 30. And on electricity tariff hike, NBA to institute legal action against the government. NAS to protest against the blackout, and also regards to that. And then we also have other smaller riders following that story. NNPC retail fuel scarcity will ease in Lagos weekend. So you can find more detail. We have some rider here where marketers are taking advantage of the scarcity. This is coming from the NNPCL. Says 1.5 billion liters of fuel in stock will last for 30 days. And then also we have Miman saying report errand members to us. Report errand members to us. More detail found inside the paper. And also here we have a study on page 28, which I think is very important. We should take a closer look at. So that is all a New Telegraph newspaper.
On the Matrix newspaper, the big story, Workers' Day gift. Federal government approves salary increase for civil servants. Armed Forces Police among beneficiaries of new 25 to 35% salary increase. Pensioners receive between 20 to 28% high undefined benefit scheme. NLC rejects electricity tariff increase, says Nigerians dying in droves. You can find details on page 2. MTN Nigeria's net FX loses hit staggering 1.39 trillion naira. On Champions League, Bayern Munich, Real Madrid settle for draw. You can find details on page 16. Sitting arrangement saga, no argument, Senate replies critic, says it's unscrupulous attempt to drag Senate into unnecessary, needless controversy. Details can be found on page 3. Abdul Samad Rabiu ASR Africa to build state-of-the-art hostel block for Futimina. You can find details on page 9. We pray for ban customers as reps order NERC to suspend implementation of new tariff. Details can be found on page 9. Binance founder jailed for 4 months in U.S. Governor's deputy War Abola urges National Assembly to amend Constitution. 200 billion naira debt set to worsen fuel scarcity as oil marketers threaten to cripple supply. No plans to sell TikTok, ByteDance insists. You can find details on page 14. Deepening bilateral relationship is the picture story we can see, where we can see the Vice President Kashim Shettima in a meeting with the U.S. Deputy Secretary Kurt Campbell and his team shortly after his arrival from the just concluded International Development Association Summit in Nairobi, Kenya. And that's all the news on the Matrix newspaper.
Right, before we continue further with other paper review, we would love to take a time out here so you can digest and drop your views concerning what the reps have done to actually halt the increment of electricity tariff, as well as the gift, according to the federal government, to civil servants ranging from even pensioners. So when we come back, we will continue with the paper review. Please stay tuned with us.
Make your everyday informative, make your everyday count. Know your world, daily affairs, national and international, with authentic news events as they unfold on Global News and Zoom on Nigeria, Monday to Friday at 1 p.m.
Welcome back. If you're just tuning in, it's still the Dailies. We have been looking at stories surrounding what is happening today, being Workers' Day, and as well looking at all the issues concerning the electricity tariff, and then the fact that today is a public holiday, just so that we can mark and actually see that the federal government is also rewarding civil servants by increasing 25% to 30% and also 20 to 28% for pensioners. So this is really good news for our workers out there, according to the federal government, and early gifts to just appreciate them for their effort. I still have Rachel Tazi with me. Thank you so much, Rachel.
You're welcome, Sarah.
All right, and I'm Sela Elisha. Let's take a look at the Guardian newspaper. And here says, endless wait for living wage, which is a big story on the Guardian newspaper. Inflation, Naira depreciation plunged Nigerians to lowest wage earners. In March 2019, when minimum wage was increased to 30,000 Naira, inflation was 11.25%. Minimum wage remains 30,000 Naira, but inflation in March 2024 was 33.20%. Now, we're going to be looking at the Nigeria's minimum wage from 2019 down till now. According to the Nigerian minimum wage in value of dollars, is that at 2019 it was $88, and then at 2020 it was $79. Then going down to about 2021 it was $63. At 2023 it is $67, and at 2023 it was $65. And then as of 2024 presently is about $23. So if you're going to equivalent the 30,000 naira with what the dollar is equivalent to the naira, you will see that workers are earning $23. Now the cost of a bag of rice, as of 2020, a bag of rice costs 26,000 naira. Then by 2021, it was 25,000 naira. Then at 2022, it increases to 31,000 naira. Then at 2023, it skyrocketed to about 55,000 naira. Now, between January to April 2024, a bag of 50 kg of rice is almost 85,000 naira richer. And then yet the federal government is yet to say something about it. And then just like I said, if you're going to look at what the workers is actually earning and then how our naira keeps devaluing as the day goes by, you know that you cannot compare the minimum wage with what is, I mean, with the reality of things presently. The inflation going up is even twice what it was as of when the minimum wage was being approved to be 30,000 naira. So we just hope that with all of this hardship, fuel scarcity and everything that people are going through presently, the government can really consider. But we're yet to hear what the new minimum wage is. All we have right here is just the consolidated minimum wage, because it was they're supposed to have this wage as of January down to when it is. So our fingers are crossed. Maybe we hear another announcement coming for the federal government what the new minimum wage will be. Also, DIMA approved self-commissioner for lands. You can find more detail of why he appointed himself as the commissioner of land on page 7. Operative repel attack as terrorists abduct 4 in Katsina State. And on May Day, federal government approved salary increase for civil servants. Oil marketers blame NNPC threatening to short outlet over 200 billion naira debt. Reps summon petroleum minister and orders over fuel scarcity and nationwide pain. Reps MBA Falana Hurua seek reversal of electricity tariff hike. Obi fault work on the Lagos-Calabar highway amid protests. More detail of that can be found on page 4, and that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On Daily Independent, federal government approves 35% salary increase for civil servants. 200 billion naira bridging claims amid fuel scarcity. Ipman threatens to shut down outlets. Fuel scarcity will ease off at the weekend, coming from oil marketers. LP decries unfair workers' practices in Nigeria. NNPP laments rising inflation, says it's against Workers' Day spirit. Still on the paper, lingering impact of fuel subsidy cut reveals federal government ineptitude. This is coming from Atiku, says Nigerians subsidizing corruption, inefficiencies in the system. APC should address hardship, not who occupies Aso Rock in 2027. South-South governors seek comprehensive review of power sector. Details can be found on page 7. Senate spokesman dismisses bickering reports over seating arrangements. Federal government repatriate over 6,000 Nigerian refugees from Chad and Cameroon. Details can be found on page 6. Reps ask NERC to hold new electricity tariff hike. NBA gives federal government 7 days to reverse tariff hike. Speaker decries significant inefficiency in tax system. And at the downside of the paper, APC leaders seek extension of suspension order on Ganduje. Details can be found on page 6, and that's all the news on Daily Independent.
On the leadership newspaper, what's trending here, this says Bello denies using state $720,000 for children's school fees. NNPC sue over missing $2.04 billion and 164 billion naira revenues. Both stories can be found on page 2. Also, we have privatize NNPC to raise 20 to 30 billion dollars revenue, Mugalu tells federal government. More detail found on page 8. Workers' Day, our hopes have been dashed, coming from Labour. And of well, crisis, which is the big story, scarcity may worsen over 20, okay, I take that story again. Fuel crisis, scarcity may worsen over 200 billion naira own marketers. With the rider, NNPCL blames Regulators say 30-day supply available. Lawmakers invite Tinubu and Luperi over the scarcity. You can find more detail of that story inside the paper. Senate in rowdy session over sitting arrangement, which we can find on page 13. Northern governors brainstorm on security challenges. And on recapitalization, 7 listed banks outline funding plans. And on the cable, mark 10 anniversary with Whitner on cost of drugs. More detail can be found on page 8. And we have a story up here that says Nigeria needs a composite government. Nigeria needs a composite government. You can find more detail of what that means on page 32 of the Leadership newspaper. We have a picture story where we can see the NYC Director General, Brigadier General Ahmed, interacting with the 2024 Batch A Stream 2 corps members during his visit to Bauchi State Orientation Camp yesterday, and that's all on the Leadership newspaper.
A big story on Blueprint: Northern governors on insecurity. We must develop our economy and human capacity. Consider command and control center, revitalization of NNDC. With political will, insecurity surmountable in 6 months, coming from Bamayi. You can turn to page 18 for details. South-South governors meet and urge federal government to review power situation. Idris seeks more funding for information ministry. MTN loses 656.3 billion to FX volatility. Details can be found on page 31. On sports, qualifying Super Eagles for 2026 World Cup, NFA tax Finidi. That is, qualify the Super Eagles for the 2026 World Cup. Tinubu signs executive order to unlock $10 billion fresh investment in oil and gas sector. Oil majors move to enforce scarcity, says 300 million liters on the way. Ibman threatens shutdown over 200 billion naira debt. On Workers' Day, federal government declared Wednesday public holiday. Debt Management Office sells 2.67 trillion naira worth of treasury bills in March. ICPC tracks 219.8 billion naira across 176 MDAs in 5 years. Details can be found on page 6. Navy rescues 250 passengers from capsized boat in rivers. And these are the major stories on Blueprint newspaper.
On this day newspaper, we have a view on Workers' Day where it says, to the hard-working men and women of Lagos State. You can find more detail of that on the front page and on page 41. My economic reform are not without challenges, Tinubu declares. You can find more of that on page 41. Presidency, 36 states, private sector sign accord to transform Nigeria into $1 trillion economy by 2030. Target universal financial access and inclusion. The big story, federal government approves 35% pay raise for civil servant. Pensioners get 28% increase. And we have some writers here that says NLC wants salary raise extended to all. ASU seek better welfare for workers. ILO says over 1 million workers may die annually from workplace hazard, which I think is relation to the theme for this year, looking at the health and welfare of workers amid the climate change. Mrs. Tinubu Obaseki hailed the workforce. You can find more detail of that in the paper. And we can see the picture story, Campbell visits the Vice President Shetima. Downside of the paper, South-South governors meet in Yelegua lament the poor state of power in the region, urges the federal government to review the situation. You can find detail of that on page 42. And that's all on this day newspaper.
On Daily Sun, May Day agony. Workers suffer over fuel scarcity, commuters stranded as commercial vehicles desert roads, fare and food prices rise. Reps summon minister asks NERC to suspend new electricity tariff. Kalu Ingige orders hail workers. Federal government announces 35% salary increase. Details can be found on page 6 and 26. Lagos-Calabar Highway project will destroy $200 million investment and 100,000 jobs, Obi warns. Commotion at Senate over seat allocation. It wasn't over seats coming from chamber. Insecurity, northern governors bemoan spike of out-of-school children. On terrorism, Meiti Allah's leader Bodejo knows fate May 30th. Court chides federal government for lukewarm persecution of Mahmoud. Details can be found on page 4. Federal government arraigns detains 4 over Imo monarch's death. Court fixes May 27 to hear applications on Ganduje's suspension. Details can be found on page 27. Kanu's continued detention, potent danger coming from Ohaneze. IPOP leaders release will strengthen country's unity, says youth group. More details can be found on page 28. Still on Daily Sun newspaper, my administration committed to significant reforms, statement from President Tinubu. Nigerians subsidizing corruption, inefficiency in government, a statement from Atiku. Details can be found on page 6 and 26. South-South governors urge federal government to address poor power situation. And then a picture story showing Governor Godwin Obaseki of Edo State and Chairman Brace Commission in the middle, Governor Doyi Diri of Bayelsa State, Deputy Governor of Akwa Ibom State. We have the Delta State counterpart. This was in her Delta State counterpart, Monday Onyema, and then we have the Director General Joe Keshi during the commission meeting in Yenugua yesterday. Also another picture showing Governor Ademola Adeleke of Osun State with Oni of Ife Oba Adeyeye at the second edition of Ipede Imole at the Owa Obokun's Palace, Ilesha, yesterday. And these are the stories on Daily Sun newspaper.
On the Abuja Inquirer paper, we have petrol scarcity persists in FCT. Commuters are groaning over that. You can start reading on the front page and continue in the paper. And on Suleja prison break, we've been seeing that happened last week. Fears over heightened crime in Abuja because it's very close there. And we're seeing that the NCS yet to furnish police with data of the escapees, and that is why we're yet to have the pictures and the names of the people who escaped. We hope that they will do just that so that police can have the detail and start going after these people for us to reduce crime in the FCT and also in the nation as a whole. FCT command talks tough concerning the prison break. Also here we have northern governors under fire over U.S. insecurity trip. More detail of that can be found in the paper. We have 2 picture stories. You can do well to grab the paper and read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On Sweet Crude report, Minister Lopobiri demanded 30 billion naira budget padding from NCDNB. This is coming from Wabote. Dismisses minister's fraud claim as tactless. NNPC first ENP archive achieved first oil at 0 ml 85 with 20,000 barrel per day production. And we have 12,000 barrel per day output unlocked from Owoba field. You can find details on page 2. Compel oil operators to seal deactivated wellheads, naval chief tells NNPC. Nigeria loses 300,000 barrels per day to oil theft, says Speaker Abbas. You can find details on the front page and continue on page 2, and that's all in you on Sweet Crude reports.
Let's take a look at what the Business Times newspaper have for us, where we have federal government approves salary increase for civil servants. More detail on page 2. Reps urge NERC to suspend hike in electricity tariff. And we have NUPRC opens bid for 17 marginary oil fields. Detail found on page 10. And on electricity tariff hike, which is the bold story on the paper, NBA threatened lawsuit against the federal government and DISCOs. Give the government 7-day ultimatum to reverse to the old electricity tariff or face a lawsuit. Says hiking electricity tariff by almost 300% unreasonable and insensitive. Minister of Power have failed Nigerians, coming from Falana. Granting regulatory powers to state with boost power supply, coming from Uni And we have NERC deregulates meter prices on the map. CBN's banking sector recapitalization triggers 2.1 trillion naira investors' profit taking. And here we are having, I expect rich nations to meet African donation requests, says the World Bank president, talking about additional. Says if Africa develops well, Africa has a lot to offer the world. So you can look more of that on page 2. We have the picture story here where we can see vehicle owners and Okada riders queuing up for the PMS, and otherwise called the petroleum, at the NNPC Limited in Ekiti State yesterday, and that's all on the Business Times newspaper.
On Sporting Sun newspaper, Everton joins race for Ndidi. You can find details on page 6. Rudiger promises to smash Mbappe in the UCL final if they make it to the final. Champions League, Emre Can Mason back for Dortmund. Haaland Palmer ahead of Isak. You can find details on page 2. Saudi Pro League includes De Bruyne in £2 billion shortlist. LeBron James undecided on Lakers' future, returns for 22nd NBA season. Details can be found at the back page. PSG plus Rashford deal. Arsenal chasing big money move to sign Vlahovic. Real Madrid Barca-Rick's Champions League expulsion. Boniface commits to Bayer Leverkusen amidst transfer speculations. Details can be found on page 6. Osimhen named in Serie A team of the week. Finidi may go for foreign assistant coach. Details can be found on page 6. Mike Tyson won his more at risk against Jake Paul. Details can be found at the back page, and that's all the news on Sporting Sun newspaper.
Let's round it up with the Business Day newspaper, where we see Workers' Day edition of the paper. Petrol crisis mute Workers' Day as scarcity stink lingers. Motorists, commuters, businesses suffer. Nigerian workers have never had it so bad, coming from Atiku. Rubles replace businesses as federal government bulldozes landmark breach. You can find more detail of that I take that story. Rubles replaces businesses as federal government bulldozes landmark bench. More detail can be found in the paper. All problems haunt to 2024 oil bid round. 5 out of 60 imaginary license in use. And Research Insights exploring solutions to Nigerian's power sector, which I think really need to be exploited. And then we have a picture story here where we can see commuters are stranded in bus stations over the fuel scarcity persisting in Lagos State. Some people have taken it to start maybe trekking to their destination as they can no longer find vehicles to their places of endeavor. And that's all of Business Day newspaper. And also how far we can go on the program this morning. Thank you, Rachel, for doing this with me.
Pleasure,
and also thank you to all our viewers. Thank you to our supporters. And once more, happy Workers' Day. Do have a great day ahead.